Hello, my name is Tammy Medlin, and I'm the local history librarian here at the Wilson County Public Library. And I would like to say thank you for joining us for Wilson County Recipes. What we are going to do today is, just in time for the holidays, we are going to take a look at some of the Wilson County cookbooks and recipes we have in our North Carolina collection, which is upstairs on the second floor. The first book we're going to take a look at is Pleasures from the Good Earth from the Elm City United Methodist Church. The book came out in 1998. It includes a short history of the church, and it has suggestions for how much food you would need to prepare to serve 25 people, 50 people, and 100 people. For example, if you were going to cook hamburger for that many people, for 25 people, it would take 9 pounds. 50 people would be 18 pounds, and 100 people would be 35 pounds. It also gives a buying guide for fresh fruits and vegetables. And one example is, it says cucumbers, you want it long and slender for the best quality, maybe dark or medium green, but yellowed ones are undesirable. So it's a nice little cookbook, and it has some extra hints in it. Well, when you wake up on Thanksgiving or Christmas morning, or basically any weekend morning, the first thing you want to do is breakfast. And so what we did on this book is we have 2 recipes for banana bread. And the second one is actually banana bread, but it's low cholesterol. The first recipe was done by Edith Farmer, and the second one was done by Jackie Chrisman. Please forgive me if I mispronounce names in this video. Now, in this video, I am showing the title page of the book, not the cover of the book, and there is a very good reason for that. Tea Table Topics was done by the Elizabeth Lamb Missionary Society from the First Methodist Episcopal Church here in Wilson, and it was actually done in 1923. So this cookbook is 101 years old. The cover's a little bit worn. We do not have this cookbook on the shelf. It is actually kept in storage because we're trying to find a way to preserve the recipes and other information that is in it. So we are looking at a cookbook from over 100 years ago, and some of the instructions may be a little bit different because, remember, you may be having a gas stove, you may have a wood burning stove, a coal burning stove, maybe you have electricity. Not everybody did. And some of these instructions, these ladies are going to assume you know what you're doing and you already know how to do this, and they don't have to spell everything out. There was a dedication in the book, and I wanted to include that. So these are portraits at the top. This is Mrs. Sue Swindell. Then down at the right, we have Mrs. Fred A. Woodard. And over at the left, we have Mrs. James T. Wiggins. And it says, in grateful recognition of the inspiration they have been to the young women of the Methodist Church. So you are looking at portraits of 3 ladies that were taken over 100 years ago. We are still dealing with breakfast, and so this page actually had 3 different recipes for pancakes. They are called griddle cakes, buckwheat cakes, and breakfast cakes. Now, since this is over 100 years old, some things may not be the same. When the griddle cakes say 1 cup of graham flour, that does not mean crushed graham cracker crumbs. Basically, graham flour, I looked it up, is a coarsely ground whole wheat flour. So whole wheat flour should work, but it would be better if it's coarsely ground. If you read in here any of these recipes and it says lard or shortening, you can substitute usually butter or margarine. May not be like your great-great-grandma used to make, but it should work. You will also notice these instructions do not tell you to, for the griddle cakes, do not tell you to set your oven at a temperature, do not tell you to set your stove at a temperature, or for how long to cook it. Basically, they're going to assume you know your stove, and each stove varies because 1923, some people may be cooking on an electric stove, some on a gas stove, some on a coal stove, and some on a wood burning stove, and they're going to assume you know your stove, you know your griddle, you know how hot to get it, and you know how quickly it cooks. So they're going to assume that you are familiar with your equipment. So everything in the older cookbooks, not everything is going to be spelled out. You just may have to experiment on your modern stove to see what works. Now for our last breakfast recipe, we're going to go to the Good Cooks cookbook, our favorite recipes, and it was done by the Wilson County Extension Homemakers Association from Wilson in 1992, and that means it is going to have recipes from ladies who were in clubs all over Wilson County. And we are looking at a recipe for blueberry muffins from Helen Salaby from the Lowest Rainwater Homemakers Extension Club, and I do apologize again if I mispronounce names. And it basically said 1½ cup flour, 1/2 cup sugar, 2 teaspoons baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon salt. If you're wondering why they specify salt, you're not used to baking, and you're wondering why they say baking powder, baking soda, and salt added to the flour, basically that means it's probably not self-rising flour. Self-rising flour usually has that mixed in. So if you're going to use self-rising flour, you probably don't have to put the baking powder and the salt into it. And it says add 1/4 cup shortening soft. Again, you could use butter or margarine. And you can tell this is modern because it says mix together with a pastry blender or a blending fork. It says 1 egg and 1/2 cup milk. And this one, since it is a whole lot later than 1923, it tells you to bake at 400 degrees for 20 to 25 minutes. And it does say these would be good with butter. So they sound pretty good to me. They take a whole cup of blueberries. They didn't say frozen blueberries. They did not say dried blueberries or fake blueberries like you'll get in your instant oatmeal. They did say blueberries. So you could probably do frozen if you let them thaw out. Okay, now we're going to move on to the main course, and this is Quick Say the Blessing from the First Baptist Church here in Wilson, and it came out in 1982, and it includes a short history of the church. Some of its extras include an everyday herb guide. One example is bay leaf. It says it's found in Turkey, Yugoslavia, Portugal, and Greece, and then it tells you what it looks like and gives you suggestions for using it. It says the bay leaf is green or aromatic leaf of the laurel tree, and it has a pungent flavor. Tastes good with vegetable and fish soups, tomato sauces and juice, poached fish, meat stews, and also available as a whole leaf. So it doesn't have to be ground up in a powder. You could actually get the leaf. Now this is a recipe for Virginia baked ham. We are in the South. It is coming up to Thanksgiving and Christmas, so I thought this would be appropriate. And it is by Mrs. L.O. Camden, or Lottie. It says wash a 6 or 7 pound ham thoroughly, sprinkle with soda, rubbing it all over, rinse in cold water, place in a deep pot with 6 cloves, 1/2 teaspoon of celery seeds, 1/2 teaspoon cinnamon, 10 peppercorns, and 1 quart sweet cider. Sounds good. And add enough boiling water to cover. Simmer 4 to 5 hours. Simmer means you keep it just below boiling. Remove skin and add 2 tablespoons brown sugar. Again, sounds good to me. Brush with beaten egg and stick in the cloves. Cover with crushed breadcrumbs and brown at 500 degrees. It does not tell, may take your stove a little bit longer to brown it. 550 degrees if your stove goes up that high. Slice and serve with currant sauce or your choice of sauce. Basically, I wanted to point out, I did read this recipe. I'm not going to do that with every one of them. If you want to use one of these recipes, pause the video and copy it down. But I got to say, Miss Camden's Virginia baked ham sounds pretty good. Our next cookbook is Saying Grace for 125 Years. This was obviously done to celebrate the church's anniversary. It is recipes from Marsh Swamp Original Free Will Baptist Church, and it is located in Rock Ridge. It has an equivalency chart, and it says one of the entries I saw was graham crackers, 14 squares equal 1 cup of crumbs, butter, 1 stick or 1/4 pound equals 1/2 cup melted butter. And there are helpful hints throughout this book. The last recipe we did was baked ham. This time we went for like an Italian theme. We found recipes in this book for baked ziti from Lisa Batts and stromboli from Keisha Lyles. So, and you basically can tell these are modern because they're using jarred spaghetti sauce and Pillsbury pizza crust. So, you don't have to change every recipe. A lot of the ingredients you still will be able to find. And I have to say, both of these sound pretty good. And the stromboli says you bake at 400 for 20 minutes. So it sounds like that one may be a quick one. And then the ziti, it says bake at 350 for 30 minutes. So that one sounds pretty quick too. May have to do some prep ahead of time, like browning the hamburger. Now, as I said, according to the title, these are Wilson County recipes. So we were just in Rock Ridge. Our next book is another Baptist church, but it is in Lucama. It is another Taste of Homecoming. It's the Little Rock Original Free Will Baptist Church, and it came out in 2023. It does contain a short history of the church, and one of its extras is it has illustrations, color diagrams in the back, actually, on the art of folding a napkin, making it fancy. It includes shapes called a shield, a rosette, a candle, a fan, and a lily. And in some of these books, everybody contributes recipes, and some people had different versions of the same recipe. So this book has 4 recipes for a cheese ball, if you need an appetizer, 7 recipes for chocolate pie, 2 for chocolate nut pie, and 1 for chocolate pecan pie. So if you like chocolate, come take a look at this book. It can be checked out. Now, even with all that chocolate, we are still in the main course section, so we found recipes for farmhouse barbecue muffins, which are basically you use buttermilk biscuits, ground beef, ketchup, brown sugar, cider vinegar, chili powder, and shredded cheese, and you basically divide them up, add them up, and bake them in, wrap them up and bake them in the oven, and it is by Doris H. Godwin. Then also, for those of us who like to use our slow cooker, we have the favorite pot roast in the crock pot, and that is by Frances Holland. 3 to 4 pound chuck roast, salt and pepper, paprika, medium onion, 1 can beef broth, and carrots and potatoes are optional. I guess you could put in there anything you wanted to. It says cook it for 8 to 10 hours on low. So I'm just letting you know, you can vary these recipes. If you don't want carrots and potatoes, use sweet potatoes. Put something else in there. You can put in there whatever you want to. It's your pot roast. These are just general instructions. Our next cookbook is Sharing Our Blessings from St. Teresa's Women's Club, the Catholic church here in town. And it came out in 1992. And it has a section on where to look in the Bible, which doesn't surprise me, it being to find information on a topic. But what does surprise me is one of the things that had you look up is not just feeling down or friendship or whatever, it's sleepless. So if you had trouble sleeping, you would look up that. It would tell you where to look in the Bible. It has instructions for baking perfect breads and baking perfect desserts, and a section on terms used in cooking. And it says, like, you read a recipe and it says to cream, and it said, this book says cream is to soften a fat, especially butter, by beating it at room temperature. So apparently, I didn't take home ec. If you want to cream something, you let it set till it's set out till it's room temperature, and then it'll mix easier. One thing a lot of people cream together is butter and sugar. This is a recipe for meat pies, and it's by Ms. Leslie Ferris. I'm sorry it got cut off, but the title is Meat Pies, and it says 1 pound ground chuck or lamb, 1 onion chopped, 3 tablespoons oil, salt and pepper to taste. Some people like a lot of spice, some don't. Actually, some people like a lot of pepper, some people don't. 2 large canned biscuits found in the dairy case, and 1/2 cup pine nuts that it does say you don't have to use. Basically, you roll your biscuit dough out in 3-inch circles, place 1 teaspoon of the mixture in the center of the dough, shape it into a triangle or fold it over, oil your baking tray, bake it 350 for 15 minutes. And then stick it in the broiler and let it get brown, and it says serve hot or cold, and it does tell you that this recipe makes 20 pies. Our next recipe from St. Teresa's is chili from Carla Brown. And I like this one because it says 3 strips of bacon, 3 medium onions, 2 pounds of hamburger, 2½ large cans of tomatoes, 1 can of kidney beans, 3 tablespoons chili powder, going to be a little bit of heat in there, and 1 can of beer, 2 teaspoons sugar, 1/2 teaspoon salt, 1/4 teaspoon pepper, 3 cloves garlic, Tabasco sauce, Texas Pete, and Worcestershire sauce. So there's going to be some heat in this recipe. Sounds pretty good to me. This next cookbook is one of my favorites. You actually can find it at the Black Creek branch, and that is because it is favorite recipes, the Black Creek Volunteer Fire Department's Ladies Auxiliary, and it came out in 1997, and it actually has a couple of things in it that may be of interest to anyone who's interested in the history of this organization. It lists the board of directors of the Volunteer Fire Department, the officers of the Ladies Auxiliary, the fire department officers. It has a list of honorary firemen and a list of firemen who were current at the time in 97 when this was done. And it also has ads from local businesses that were in business back then that may be gone now, and it includes a short history of the Black Creek Volunteer Fire Department. This time we have 3 recipes on one page, and they are basically comfort foods. We have hamburger casserole for Candy Minshaw, peppered steak from Brenda Strickland, and shrimp jambalaya from Joyce Blow. So any of these sound good to me, especially when the weather's about to turn cold. It's going to be in the 50s tomorrow. It's supposed to be raining today. Any of these sound good to me. Now, I did kind of stretch the rules a little bit. For this next cookbook, I said they were Wilson County recipes. Well, this one was not written by an organization in Wilson County. It's called the Old Carolina Tobacco Country Cookbook from the Great Depression to World War II. And basically, it has all kind of recipes that people who lived, dealt with tobacco, and definitely applies to this area, and lived out on the farms and worked in the fields. Some of the recipes they would use, and also some of the way they lived. There is one description in here of hog killing time, butchering time. There's another description called the dinner bucket, and it basically is saying what they would pack to take out to lunch working in the field or in the barn, like sausage biscuit, put you some tomatoes and cucumbers with a knife in there so you could cut them up out in the field, that kind of thing. How they packed their lunch when they didn't have an ice block or to keep it cold, and they didn't have a thermos and things like that. It talks about what people would keep up under the house because, there's no air conditioning, so the house is sitting up off the ground. It's good for storage. Air circulates and keeps it cooler. So it's actually a pretty good little book for about life during that time period. And there may be recipes in here that your grandmother or great-grandmother would have used. So before anybody jumps on my case about hunting, you have to understand this is said from the Great Depression for World War II, so you're talking 1930, 1945. A lot of people were tenant farmers, sharecroppers. There was not a lot of money to go around no matter who you were, and people would hunt to supplement their food supply. They basically didn't have a choice. So there's recipes for squirrel, there's a recipe here for a cottontail rabbit, and the book also includes recipes for woodland duck stew and a couple of recipes for venison. It also includes a recipe for sausage and sweet potatoes and okra and things like that. So, but this is just to show you this book deals with the time period when you hunted because you had to. Not because you wanted to or for sport. It may be a case of survival. Our next book is Heavenly Recipes, and it is from the First United Methodist Church here in Wilson, and it is from their Volunteers in Mission group. Let's see, I don't really have a date on this one, but it does have a section on Angels Among Us, and it is in memory of Volunteers in Mission team members who have gone to their great reward. Now, it does have multiple recipes for some foods. It has 6 recipes for chili, 4 recipes for crab dip, and 5 recipes for sweet potato casserole. And there is an index in the back of the book to help you look all this up. And with this book, we are moving on to the breads. So there's a recipe for angel biscuits, and it says 1 package dry active yeast, 2 tablespoons very warm water, 5 cups all-purpose flour, 1 teaspoon baking soda, 3 teaspoons baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon salt, 1 1/2 teaspoons salt, 2 tablespoons of sugar, 1 cup vegetable shortening. Again, you could use butter. 2 cups buttermilk. Now, if you think 1 1/2 teaspoons salt is a bit much, you could cut it back. And this is by Jeannie Evans, and she said the recipe was given to her by her daughter-in-law, Nicole Rideout. Again, I apologize if I mispronounce any names. Now, if you are like me and you're not comfortable trying to make biscuits with baking powder, baking soda, and all of that, we also have a recipe for easy angel biscuits by Heather Totten. Again, I apologize for names. And it says 2 cups Bisquick baking mix, 1 package yeast, 2 tablespoons vegetable oil, and 1/2 cup buttermilk. And it says it does 12 to 14 biscuits. So if you want something a little less involved, we do have some easy recipes. For some of our side dishes, we're going to turn to a cookbook called Signs and Seasonings, and it says ENCSD. This cookbook is by the Parent Teacher Organization for the Eastern North Carolina School for the Deaf, which is located here in Wilson. It came out in 2000, and at the back of the book, it includes samples of the sign language alphabet and some simple words like home, help, etc. It was done to support Parent Teacher Organization scholarships and projects. Now, this first one is one I have not really thought about before. It is barbecue potatoes. It said boil Irish potatoes. For those of you who don't know, that means regular white potatoes until tender in salt water. Drain, add black pepper to taste. 1 tablespoon crushed red pepper, so it's going to be a little bit spicy. 1/2 cup vinegar. 2 large onions. Let simmer covered for 5 to 10 minutes, and it is by Lucilla Hargrove. Now, right under that, this is the holidays. This is North Carolina, so we have a recipe for sweet potato crunch. Personally, I think this could double as a dessert. 3 cups sweet potatoes mashed. That means already cooked and mashed. 1/2 teaspoon salt. 1/2 stick melted margarine. 1 teaspoon vanilla. 1 cup sugar. 2 eggs. 1/2 cup milk. And you would put those in there and mix those in and put them in a buttered dish. And then you would make a topping of 1/2 stick melted butter, 1 cup brown sugar, 1/2 cup self-rising flour, and 1 cup chopped pecans. And when you mix that together, you would sprinkle it on top of the potatoes and bake at 350 degrees for 30 minutes. So to me, this could either be a side dish or sounds like a pretty good dessert to me. You let me eat this, I probably won't eat another dessert. And we are sticking with the Eastern North Carolina School for the Deaf. For the rest of our side dishes, we have squash casserole by Bonnie Pike and corn pudding by Ruby Gill. I do apologize. I could not find, it did not have listed the name of the person who submitted the sweet potato crunch recipe. You start with 2 pounds canned squash drained, 2 medium grated carrots, 1 can cream of chicken soup, 1 small diced onion, 1 small jar of pimento drained, and 1/2 pint sour cream. That is your squash casserole. Corn pudding, it's 4 eggs, 1/2 cup self-rising flour, 1 teaspoon vanilla, 1/2 stick margarine, 16-ounce can of whole corn, 1 3/4 cup sugar, and 3 cups milk. Now, I will point out, if you are looking at a recipe that says flour and then it says add salt, and baking powder or baking soda to the flour, you make it leave out the salt and the baking powder, baking soda, and just use self-rising flour. But if you are looking at a recipe that specifies self-rising flour, that is what you need to use. Now we are moving on to the desserts, so we are going to turn again into the Good Cooks Cookbook, which we have already talked about. And this is a recipe for old-fashioned cookies by Bonnie D. Webb from the Weaver Club. And even though it just says old-fashioned cookies, they sound pretty good to me. 1 cup shortening, again you could use margarine, 2 cups brown sugar, 1 teaspoon vanilla, 2 eggs, 2 1/2 cup flour, 1 teaspoon salt, and 1 cup pecans chopped. It says mix them up and drop them on the cookie sheet. Bake at 350 degrees for 10 to 12 minutes. Ms. Webb, sound good to me. Our last cookbook is a special one. It's Girl Scouts in the Kitchen. It was done by the Junior Girl Scout Troop 404 in Stantonsburg. It was done in 2003. It includes a short history of Girl Scouts in Wilson County. It lists the leaders and the 9 girls who were in the troop at that time. And its helpful hints include microwave hints, so you definitely know you're moving to modern times. From what I read in the book, this book was compiled and sold to try to raise money for the girls to go on a trip to Disney World. Now, our first recipe for a dessert is candy apple salad, and I read the title and I am like, how do you make a salad out of candy apples? It is the fall, so that's the fair. That's the first thing that popped in my mind was candy apples. But it turns out it's a little bit different. It's not candy apples, but it does use a lot of candy. It says you take an 8-ounce tub of whipped cream, basically Cool Whip, 2 8-ounce cans of crushed pineapples, drained, 3 Granny Smith apples that have been peeled and cubed, and 3 Snicker candy bars sliced or cubed. Basically, just take your Snickers bars and cut them up, and 1/2 cup chopped peanuts. Mix well together, top with chopped peanuts or grated chocolate if desired, and chill it. And this is Mia LaPlante. Again, excuse me for the name. And it sounds good to me, and it sounds like one the kids could help you do. And this is one you would probably only find in this book. It says leftover Girl Scout cookie sheet, and 3/4 cup milk, 3 large scoops of vanilla ice cream, 2 tablespoons chocolate syrup, and 6 Thin Mint Girl Scout cookies. Around my house, we usually don't have leftover Thin Mints, but if you do, put them in a milkshake. It says in a blender, combine the milk, vanilla ice cream, and chocolate syrup. This is for the children to do because it says ask an adult to blend well. Put 6 Thin Mint cookies in a Ziploc bag and crush the cookies with a rolling pin. Stir the cookie crumbs into the shake mixture and enjoy. And this is for 2 shakes. So that's why it's 3 large scoops. And this is by Luann Shear, and she was the leader of Junior Troop 404. And our last recipe is diabetic spice cookies for Donna Lolis. And it says 1 1/4 cup water, 2 cups raisins, 2 teaspoons cinnamon, 2 sugars, 1/4 cup brown sugar substitute, 2 cups sifted flour, 1 teaspoon soda, 1/2 teaspoon nutmeg, 1/3 cup shortening, 1/2 teaspoon salt, 2 tablespoons water, 1/4 cup white sugar substitute, and 1 teaspoon baking powder. It says boil the water, nutmeg, raisins, shortening, cinnamon, and salt for 3 minutes. Cool, add in everything else, beat well, and drop spoonfuls onto a greased cookie sheet. Bake at 350 degree oven for 10 to 12 minutes. Well, we have come to the end of our program, and I would like to thank you for joining us for Wilson County Recipes. I also would like you to invite you, if you're watching us on YouTube or Facebook, and if you're able to comment, list some of your favorite recipes down below. And also, if you have a cookbook from a Wilson County organization and you would like to donate it, we would be happy to take it and add it to our collection. Just bring it to the circulation desk at our main branch and tell them it is for Tammy. And again, thank you for joining us for our program today. And if you try any of these recipes, let us know how they turned out, and enjoy your holidays.